Morning class, back on the blades. Leg doesn't feel great, but I really hate this brick. That's better. Normally every day I'm gonna want to take you out in the world. I mean, culture is everywhere, right? So we should be able to find all kinds of things out in the world. But today, I really wanted to dig into some old photos and some videos and tell you 3 stories about my first trip to New Guinea that really helped me realize the importance of asking questions, making connections, and trying new things. So I'm gonna be reliving some really good old memories today. The stories I want to tell are much better told in front of an audience. So I'm gonna clip some stuff together from a lecture here, and the quality on the video is not great, so I apologize for that, but I think it's still a really good lecture and I hope you enjoy it. So exactly 20 years ago, I was sitting right here facing that direction because the room used to be oriented that way. I was just a small town kid from Nebraska, didn't really know what I was doing, and this guy started lecturing and he was talking about all these people from all over the world. And as a small town kid from Nebraska, I had all these questions about my own life. I couldn't just hear what he was saying and just write it down and then memorize it for the exam. It was threatening my worldview. It was threatening my understanding of how the world works. I found it threatening and then kind of exciting. He was kind of lighting me up with this call to adventure kind of thing. And so I decided at that moment I'd be an anthropologist. I had all these questions and I decided I was going to go travel the world. This is the place where I landed. This is the first hotel I went to. This is my first experience in New Guinea. I walk out and these 2 guys are walking toward me and they say, "Hey, Mone." And they speak a pidgin English. I kind of think they're probably asking for money, obviously, but I think maybe they're saying good morning. So I say, "Morning, morning." And they say, "No, God, morning, morning." And they start tapping their pockets like this. I pretend like they're teaching me a greeting, and I say, "Morning, morning," and I tap my pockets. And they don't think this is funny. And the one guy steps in front of me, he pulls his jacket back, and he's got this 2-foot machete in there. And so I turn my back so that if he slashes at me, he'll just hit my backpack. And I start running. And I run around this corner, and fortunately around the corner were all these wonderful people that I was hoping I might meet. And they chased these 2 guys off, and I walked straight to the airport. And then I'm at the airport, and I'm looking at the departures. And the first departure is to Brisbane, Australia. And I thought, this is where I should get, I can get out of here. It's basically halfway home. I'm really tempted by Australia. And then I'm looking down the list, and down the list are all these little villages, a couple of which I had heard about in my anthropology class. And I realized that the answers to my questions were not going to be in Australia. They were going to be somewhere down that list. And it was my questions that got me on the next plane further into New Guinea and kept me on this path. The best questions won't just have great answers. The answers themselves will be new questions. I want to invite you all in to feel what this feels like, to come into a village like this. And what we know about this village, what you know if you're on the plane with me, is you know you've just taken that last big leap into a place of the unknown. But when you land here, your money's no good, no cash economy here. There's no running water, there's no electricity, there's no way to contact anybody. So when you land, you're totally dependent on the locals. One of our goals here is going to be to see our seeing, disrupting our basic assumptions. We're going to try to see how different the world can be. And there are a few tools that you might have picked up in chapter 1 and moving forward in the text that I want to review real quick. One is this idea of ethnocentrism. This is a great realization if you're trying to get to see your own seeing, is the realization that many of our ideas are ethnocentric. Ethnocentrism is the belief that one's own cultural beliefs and practices are the only proper ones. Such a belief is really a prison for the mind. If you are stuck in this idea that your own cultural beliefs and practices are the only proper ones, it's very difficult to open up to others and understand their ways of life. For me, when I first heard this word sitting in this spot, this was the first word that struck me. I never even considered this idea that my basic beliefs and values that were in many ways unexamined altogether. So this ethnocentrism goes along with another perspective, which is cultural relativism, which is this idea that we are going to suspend judgment. This isn't the same as moral relativism. Cultural relativism, we're talking about just suspending judgment so that we can understand other people in their own terms, understand their full context, understand why they believe what they believe, why they do what they do. And only after that, then we can look back on our own culture as well. This is a very powerful tool for examining our own assumptions and biases. By suspending judgment and understanding other people in their own terms, by empathizing with them, we ultimately then can look back on ourselves and our own culture with new eyes. There's that great parable of the fish who would never discover water. A fish would never discover water because they're just immersed in it. It's only by leaping out that you could ever even see the water. And it's the same thing with our culture. We are all so embedded inside it that we can't see it. And we have to jump outside of it to see it. The last thing is a field worker's toolkit: communication, empathy, and thoughtfulness. And these things all work together so that the more thoughtful we are and the better we communicate, the more we'll be able to empathize. As our empathy grows, we'll learn new ideas and be more thoughtful. As we're more thoughtful, we'll be able to communicate better. The whole thing works together in this way. So this is ultimately what we're trying to do: create deep and meaningful relationships with local people so that we can empathize and understand their world better. The last piece of this is that we have to do participant observation. So this is what occurred when I first arrived. There's like this big dance in the night. And this is like, as an anthropologist, this is like a dream, right? This is like, oh my gosh, they're doing this sacred dance. Like, I have to figure out what's going on. Of course, what I'm trying to do is try to observe it and watch it, but it's very difficult to see. It's at night. And only later did I realize how important it was to actually participate. So you can see me dancing there. And I'm going to just demonstrate what this looks like. See, I'm going to have to get in the dance here. So, see my feather, how it's not doing anything, and then it pops like that. When I first started dancing, I thought, this is a lame dance. You know, you're just doing this, and you're hitting your drum. And I thought, how boring, and they do this all night. Like, why would they do this all night? And what is the meaning? Like, what's that bird feather? I'm just concerned with the meaning. What does this performance mean? So here I was bouncing along, and everybody's like, you're a terrible dancer. And I'm like, you're just going up and down, you know? Like, what's so hard about that? And then somebody was like, no, you got to pop it, you know? And then once I started popping it, then these women would run by and would grab at my tail feathers as they'd pop up. And I noticed, you know, it's kind of flirtatious, and these guys were actually disappearing into the woods with women. And I started to realize, like, oh, this is not some exotic performance for the anthropologist. This is people having fun. This is people dancing. So that was a big breakthrough for me. And it only came when I started participating. As long as I was observing, I was just trying to understand the meaning of it. But there's so much more when you actually participate. You got to get involved. And once you get involved, you're going to feel it from the inside. You're going to understand something very different. I decided at this point that, you know, I've come this far, but I felt comfortable enough that I was ready to keep going. And I started walking. I walked for 2 days through places like this and past villages like this, and ran into this guy. Later, I was at the Wichita Zoo, and I saw that one kick with a sharp inner toe can disembowel a predator or even a human. But I didn't know that, so I got the close-up. And so then we come in here, and this will be the second sacred spot of the story. This is the first one. This is the second one. This is the village where I would end up living off and on for the next 8 years. So I spent about 2 years total over an 8-year period there. This is what it looks like when you're sitting around the fire in one of these houses here. You'd be amazed at how much is different in another culture. For example, you might think that laughter is a human universal, that laughter, everybody laughs the same way. But that's not true. In New Guinea, they actually do like a collective laughter. So as I walk in, all I can understand is one word, and that one word that I understand is the word they've adopted for me, which is white man. So all I hear is blah, 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 white man, and then they all start laughing. And and this is what the laughter sounds like. So you notice how it's like a ha, and they're collective yee. So now I'll give you a quick tour of the village here. This is your food. Food includes spiders, eggs, snakes. Snakes are like a 2-for-1 deal because when a snake eats, it gets lazy, and that's when you catch the snake, and you can cut it open and get the appetizer. After we ate this is about a week after I arrived, and then that night I'm back in this little house looking around, and there's holes everywhere, and you can see my sleeping bag here. I used to wrap myself up in that sleeping bag, and I used to call it my little America. It was like my little escape. It's the tropics. It's hot. And so it's hard to stay in a sleeping bag all night. And in the middle of the night, when I'd fall asleep, the sleeping bag would come off of me. And I'd have to wipe stuff off of me. There'd be like little stuff in my ears, like little bugs in my ears. And that snake was found like 100 feet from where we're staying. There's holes everywhere in this little hut. I'm thinking this snake probably has family. So I'm wrapping myself up in the sleeping bag, middle of the night, wake up, sleeping bag's off me, and I feel this thing laying across my chest. It's like this big around. And I managed to throw it off of me, but as I threw it, I rolled with it. And I managed to pin it down with my left hand, but I can't move my right arm. And so I try to free my right arm so I can pin it down with two hands, but I can't move my right arm. And it's at this point I realize I've actually pinned down my own right arm, like this. And my arm had just fallen asleep and was across me like this. So there was no snake. And then I have to like explain to them why I'm wrestling with myself. And I don't speak the language, right? And so now I'm just hearing a lot of blah, 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 white man, and then. So this is culture shock, right? Anxiety provoked by being immersed in a foreign culture. You see the next piece there, that at worst it is experienced as a complete loss of self. I had thought that I was in culture shock for like 2 months, and I went back and read my journals last summer and discovered that it had actually been 8 months. And it was like a dark, dark, dark 8 months. I thought that who I am is something inside of me that I project outward, and that when I went to this place, I would just project this self outward, and I would always be myself. What I discovered when I got there over time was that who we are is also reflected back to us by the people around us. And if you're around a bunch of people who don't know you, don't know what you're doing, don't know why you're there, you start to ask the same questions, like who am I, what am I doing, why am I here? Imagine not being able to express yourself in any way. You can't tell your jokes. Your inflection doesn't make sense to them. You're trying to present yourself in a certain way, but they don't understand who you're trying to be or what you're trying to convey. In that sense, you've lost yourself. And so I felt just terrible. I just started shutting down. I was so afraid to speak because I was so fragile. I didn't want to add stupidity on top of this list of bizarre traits that they must have been tabulating for me. And so I would just not say anything. So here I was, I'm in New Guinea, I have all these great questions. I want to explore the human condition and all of its ramifications. So what better place to be than right here in this very different place? And yet I was learning nothing because I was totally shutting down. I wasn't seeing the little things. I wasn't seeing the big picture. I wasn't seeing my assumptions and biases. I wasn't seeing anything because I was just shut down. I purposefully put on blinders and just tried to grind it out. I used to just count the days, waiting for the plane to get back home. And one day I was walking along this ridge and I was feeling so sad that I started feeling weak. I had no experience with this. I had no understanding of depression, no background with depression. And here I was, like I was feeling physically weak, so physically weak that I just collapsed on the side of this ridge and I just started crying. And I'm sitting there crying, and these two guys who are walking behind me come up beside me, and by the time they get to me, they were crying too. And so we're sitting on this ridge just crying, and they don't even know why I'm crying. And, and it was so great to feel that sense of connection. Like I immediately started to feel better. And they asked me why I was crying, and I said that I miss my wife. And they started laughing and laughing. They said, oh, we would never miss our wives. And so there's lessons everywhere, right? They said, but we miss our kids. And then they started crying. One of the reasons why I didn't heal a lot faster in New Guinea was because nobody knew how much I was suffering. It wasn't until I broke down and was crying on the side of this ridge that anybody knew what a struggle I was going through. These people rallied behind me and supported me and helped me through this. Everything started to change at that point. Once I felt safe and comfortable, once I felt connected, then the questions were something I could get after. The language was something I could get after. Once I felt comfortable with them, I just totally blossomed in my language. Of course, I started by talking like a 2-year-old, but that's okay, right? Because pretty soon I was talking like a 3-year-old, and then pretty soon I was talking like a 4-year-old, a 5-year-old, and then I was fine. And this is that joy of trying new things. It's not just questions. It's not enough just to have questions. You also have to be making connections, deep, meaningful connections, so that you feel comfortable, that you feel safe, and then you experience the joy of trying new things. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to go check out the book. It's free online. And if you're enrolled, don't forget to take the quiz. I'll see you tomorrow. Questioning, making connections, trying new things. It's just so beautiful. By amazing twists of fate, I've ended up right back here in this very spot where the journey began. And it's very, very powerful for me personally to stand here and tell you this story.